Afternoon, everyone. As Nokwanda mentioned, I'm moderating session 3, titled Where Are We Now? My name is Baba Gule, and I currently work with the Just Energy Transition Project Management Unit in the Presidency, South Africa. Today's session 3, offers us an opportunity, and really the intention is to reflect, take reflections from fellow APORDians, a fellow APORDian myself, on understanding from their perspective some of the complexities and challenges and opportunities and levers that they see as from the perspective and their lens as practitioners in the industrial policy development process, really to just discuss with them, hear what their experience is, and really reflecting on the theoretical lessons that they themselves took from APORDE and perhaps some of the disconnect from the perspective of themselves being practitioners. So I'm not going to introduce Itumeleng Mokoena and Zainab Kamara. I think their bios have been distributed. I'm going to offer them an opportunity when they provide their inputs to reflect, of course, on as they reflect on their experience, to offer up a bio of themselves. Itumeleng, you're online. I'm pressed for time, so I'm rushing. Apologies. And Zainab, just want to confirm you're online. Hi, Itu. Lovely to see you. And
Yes,
Zainab?
I am. Yes.
Perfect. So I'll kick us off. It's just a discussion, as I said. There are no presentations. And really, as I mentioned, the intention is for us to understand from yourselves embedded in the policy development process, how at various phases, of course, how from your perspective, if you can, I know we're pressed for time, please can you provide us with maybe 2 key observations that your experience has provoked, obviously reflecting on the complexity of your context, and again, taking us through perhaps some opportunities and key levers that you see towards driving industrial development. I'm going to take, because I know you, Itu, I'm going to take Zainab first, and then I'll take Itu afterwards. So take it away, Zainab.
Thank you very much, Baba. I had just one slide. I don't know if Rosal, you can project it, or do you want me just to share my screen? Okay, just the second slide, please. Thank you very much. This is a real pleasure for me to join you today and to reconnect with the APORDE community. Since the program, well, I think the program was one of the real spaces where academic thinking and real-world policy questions actually met. And so that combination was extremely valuable in the work that we do. So since completing the program, I had the opportunity to apply several of the insights in my daily work, where I work in the intersection of government strategy, industrial policy, and industrial implementation. So I'm not going to go through the rationale, because I think a lot of good ideas and insight have been shared since this morning. And I think one thing that we all recognize, that industrialization in Africa has been quite striking since the independence days. And so now the question is, why has the implementation of the industrialization have been proven to be difficult? And through my experience and through the APORDE program, several reflections have emerged in my mind. Some of them that I would like to share with you, and then go into specific details later. So some of the reflection were that sometimes probably industrial strategies are designated without strong linkages to the broader economic ecosystem, lack of infrastructure planning and industrial development that move in parallel rather than together. And we have recognized also the sometimes regional markets remain fragmented. And perhaps most importantly, and that has also been recognized on many occasions, economic policy framework underestimate the importance of political leadership, institutional coordination, and human capital. And I'm glad that all those questions were covered this morning. So this reflection has shaped how I approach industrial policy in practice, and then bring me to the 3 key lessons from the program at APORDE that have actively tried to apply in my daily work. The first reflection or key learning was that the idea that particularly stayed in me from the program was the concept developed by Chris Kramer and Shinji Shizuru, titled the industrialization of freshness. So which challenges a very traditional assumption that industrialization must always begin with manufacturing. So in reality, we can see that high value agriculture can itself function as a highly sophisticated industrial system. So if you think about what it takes today to export fresh produce competitively to global market, it also involves logistics networks, cold chains, phytosanitary standard, certification systems, packaging technologies, data systems, and specialized transport. So in other words, what appears to be agriculture often functions as a complex industrial system. So a good example that was shared during the program was the Peru blueberry industry. So 2 decades ago, Peru was not a major exporter of berries. So through coordinated public policy, investment in irrigation, export logistics, and market development, the country built an integrated value chain. So today, Peru is one of the largest exporters for blueberry globally, generated over 1.3 billion in export annually and creating tens of thousands of jobs. So the key insight here is that industrial transformation did not start with the factory. It started with a strategic product niche, and then a system of activities and industries grew around it. We see similar opportunities emerging in Africa. I was glad that Dr. Faisal mentioned Togo, where I work at the moment, is trying to become one of the leading exporters of organic soybeans to the European Union market. But exporting raw soil is only the first step. The real challenge here, and the real opportunity also, is building the entire value chain around the niche. So processing, certifications, logistics, research, branding, and marketing, and premium market positioning. Industrialization, in many cases, is less about choosing sectors and more about organizing ecosystems. And once we begin to think in terms of ecosystem, another question naturally emerges. Who has the authority and the capacity to organize these systems? Which brings me to the second key lesson, which is industrialization requires political leadership and state coordination, which goes aligned with Mr. Abel's presentation. So one of the most powerful insights from the program also was the importance of looking at industrial policy through a political economy lens. Unfortunately, what I observe from the political science background is that economists often focus on incentives and markets when they talk about industrialization. But in practice, industrial transformation is rarely the result of a market alone. It requires strategic leadership and coordination across the states and government agencies. This is something emphasized strongly in the work of Jonathan D. John and Dr. Amir, who showed that structural transformation required deliberate state capacity, not only market signal. In practice, this often means creating dedicated coordination mechanisms at the highest level of government. Mechanisms capable of aligning ministries, investors, infrastructure planning, and regulatory reforms. One concrete example that I can share comes from Guinea through the setting up of the Guinea's Strategic Committee for the Simono Project, one of the largest mining and infrastructure development in Africa. So the committee operated at the presidential level and brought together all relevant ministries and stakeholders to accelerate decision-making. That institutional coordination dramatically improved the speed of implementation. And also at the Tony Blair Institute, at TBI work, this approach is also central to our work. For example, in Togo, we helped to establish the country's first presidential delivery unit back in 2018 that was designated to coordinate priority reforms across ministries and track implementation. Different countries use different models: strategic councils, delivery units, presidential task forces, but the principle remains the same. Industrial policy requires institutions capable of execution, not only strategy. And yet, even the strongest coordination mechanism will eventually face a deeper constraint, because industrialization is ultimately carried by people. So, which brings me to the third key lesson. Industrial policy must be connected to human capital systems. One reflection I had during the program was quite simple. When we discuss economic reforms, the conversation often took place only amongst economists. But industrial transformation is not only about economic policy. It's also about education systems, skills development, and knowledge production. Across many African countries, we observe that paradox. Economic sectors expand, GDPs grow, but employment growth remains limited. One major reason is the disconnect between education systems and industry needs. I also encountered this challenge directly when I was working as a chief of staff of the Ministry of Higher Education and Research in Guinea. At the time, we worked with major maritime and logistic companies to co-design and co-construct a master's degree in port logistics and maritime operations. Industry helped to shape the curriculum, and when the students graduated, they were already operational because they were that link between industry and academia. So that alignment is essential if industrial policy is to translate into job creation. This issue is particularly urgent given Africa's democratic trajectory.
Pardon, Zainab, one minute.
Okay. The trajectory by 2050, we know that Africa working age population is projected to reach more than 1 billion people, representing nearly 1/4 of the global labor force. So this democratic transformation will define the continent's economic future. Whether it becomes a demographic dividend or demographic pressure will depend largely on how effectively industrial policy and human capital system are aligned. So to simply to wrap up, industrialization is often discussed as if it were a technical process, but in reality, it is something much more complex. It is the result of strategic choices, institutional coordination, and long-term learning. So the APORDE program reminds us that industrialization is not only about copying models, also it's about understanding the political, economy, and institutional realities that shape transformation. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that the conversation between research, policy, and practice must continue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ito. I'm very interested to hear your input, given Zainab's call to action, particularly as you are senior economist at the National Treasury.
Thanks, Baba. Nice to see you again. I'm just shortly going to turn my video on and turn it off again so that I can quickly rush through my presentation. I don't have anything to share at the moment, but I'm happy to write it down in case any other colleagues wants to have a view of what I was speaking about. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to take you through where I am now briefly and what I've learned at APORDE, which I think I joined, it was a 2024 cohort, and how I've applied the lessons learned at the program at the time to my work as well as my studies. So I'm currently working, as Baba has mentioned, as a senior economist at the National Treasury within the Microeconomic Policy Unit. And my work mainly involves producing economic research and doing public policy analysis on issues related to industrial policy, as well as international trade. Before that, I worked as a senior analyst at DNA Economics and as well as an economist at TIPS. I'm doing similar work to what I'm doing at National Treasury now, which is research on industrial policy and international trade issues. And finally, I am a first-year part-time PhD student in Applied Development Economics at Wits, with a dissertation that focuses on the implication of geoeconomic fragmentation on South Africa's industrial competitiveness, as well as implication for industrial development strategies moving forward. In terms of the key lessons that I have learned at APORDE, I think there was quite a lot of things that were thrown at us over the course of 2 weeks. But I joined the program wanting to solidify my understanding around industrial policy, but also understand key issues within the discipline. And at that point, I learned about how industrial policy thinking is evolving, especially in the context of developing countries. The big takeaway for me was that traditional industrialization playbook is changing, and countries now face a far more complex policy environment. And I think this became clearer in Professor Lebedeau's lecture, where he indicated that conditions that allowed countries to industrialize in the past, whether it be your early industrializers or your East Asian economies, are just not replicable anymore, but they are also very no longer sustainable in terms of climate change. So while industrial policy in this context still remains a key tool in achieving structural transformation, it has to adapt in order to respond to the current realities. This includes climate change constraints, global competition that we've seen increasingly over the past years or so, in terms of protectionism, as well as a race to producing high-tech products. Furthermore, in order for industrial policy to respond to current realities, it needs to be developed in careful coordination with energy policy, for instance, environmental policy, skills development, as well as labor market policies. Without this coordination, you are likely to see industrial policy succeeding in responding to current realities, because you do need to take into consideration of what is happening with your energy policy, what is happening with regards to the environment, as well as the skills base that you have in order to enter some of the value chains. And the second key point that came out at the time was that we need to start thinking beyond sectors when we're coming up with industrial policy plans. Yes, indeed, manufacturing still remains a key and important sector in this case, but it's also vital to recognize that modern production has blurred sectorial boundaries quite a bit, where manufacturing is increasingly becoming more service intensive and agriculture is coming more and more embedded in manufacturing. I think this, as Zainab has mentioned, it became quite clearer in the lecture that was provided by Professor Kramer as well as Shingi on industrialization of freshness. And lastly, one of the key takeaways was around integration into global value chain, which I think, in my view, is the most understudied aspect of South Africa's industrialization in this case. And this was, I learned quite a bit through the lectures provided by Professor Turgena as well as Andrioni. And the question that I learned there is that the question is not simply about participating in global value chains, but also upgrading within this value chain in order to avoid what they call thin industrialization. This is when countries enter into these global value chains in low value added segments and remain stuck there. But I also learned the importance of, when you enter these global value chains, countries must devise plan in order to ensure that they create domestic linkages where foreign investment and export activities feed back into the local economy. So how have I used these lessons? I must be honest, at the time that I attended APORDE, I went to a little bit of a mission in order to refine my research problem that I wanted to undertake in my PhD. So what those ideas have solidified that the research problem that exists, and I can carry on with it. And I really wanted to find out the extent to which what is happening in the global economy affects our industrial competitiveness and what this means for our industrial strategy moving forward. But more importantly, at work, I think APORDE has helped me shape how I think about industrial policy design, and somewhat provided me with a toolkit on how to evaluate industrial policies. For instance, currently I'm working on doing a subsector reviews in manufacturing in order to identify key constraints, whether vertical or horizontal constraints to manufacturing growth. I think most of us understand here South Africa's manufacturing growth over the past decade has been very, very weak. And even where there have been improvements in network industries due to structural reforms that have been taken by government, the performance of the sector still lags behind. So in the sector, we're looking to identify if there is any additional constraints that we may have missed. And what I've done in the analysis was to include the questions around sustainability, the positions of firms within the value chains, and the extent to which there are domestic linkages for those firms that are integrated within global value chains. And on the last note, I think personally, one of the most important aspects of APORDE, its approach to heterodox thinking. I think industrial policy over the past 5 years has regained its popularity. And as a result, it risks of becoming about everything and nothing at the same time. And I think APORDE has done a very good job in grounding industrial policy in its intellectual tradition. And I think that is very helpful to perhaps colleagues or people that might not have the time to follow intellectual debate, to closely distinguish between ideas that generally seek to build productive capabilities and those that just use the language of industrial policy without attempting to address some of the structural transformation. Those are my quick reflection, and I just wanted to say thank you to TIPS and the organizers for a great program. Thank you.
Thank you, Itu, and I think you have brilliantly closed out this session with a call to action. So no need for me to add to that. Just to say thank you to Itu and Zainab, and all the best in your work. And hopefully, Itu, we will collaborate. We forget because we're so deeply embedded in our work that collaboration, leveraging the APORDE network can can help us in our silos. So I'm going to hand over for the concluding remarks to Dr. Liemo, and I'm going to botch your surname, Tipeulu, who probably needs no introduction. And in the interest of time, I'll hand over to you. Thank you. Lovely to see everyone again. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Baba. And good afternoon, good morning to all the participants, wherever you may be. I think we've had a very interesting and insightful set of presentations. They spoke indeed to the issues of importance for African development. I think they also try to bridge the gap, which is one of the fundamental purposes of APORDE. They try to bridge the gap between empirical evidence and mainstream perspectives on development. And I think in particular, they highlighted the central role of structural transformation in economic development. I make no attempt to summarize what has been said. The documents, I'm sure, will be shared. I think what I wanted to bring out in closing is to say that your work is not yet done. There are greater challenges facing APORDE and people of like mind in the years ahead, especially the faculty and the alumni of APORDE. Basically, I think that we have to accept that we are in a changing world and that the changing global dynamics are going to affect all of us, both politically and economically. So we know, for instance, that in the area of peace and security, the old might is right approach to international relations has reemerged. We are seeing sharp declines in aid and technical cooperation, and we are seeing that globalization, whatever its merits, is being replaced with the weaponization of interdependence, including through the use of tariffs, financial sanctions, and indeed the disruption of supply chains. Given that context, we're challenged with how then can African economies begin to undertake development. A picture also complicated, I think, by the erosion of the labor-intensive manufacturing, the opportunities for labor-intensive manufacturing. So we all know, for instance, that with robotics, there is a great challenge, and with reshoring, there's a great challenge to labor-intensive manufacturing. We know for a fact that because of the trade restrictions I mentioned, that the whole idea of export-oriented industrialization is also under assault. And I would say then we have to begin to think about what are the pathways for Africa's structural transformation, if we remember also the challenges of ecological degradation and climate change, and the fact, as I said, that technology, especially artificial intelligence, has complicated the picture. So I'm thinking that, as we go ahead and we work on these things, we as a collective have to begin to reflect on also how to adapt our thinking and the things we know to a changing world order. And in so doing and living with that challenge, I just want to end by expressing appreciation to all those who have helped to make this possible, starting from the staff in TIPS to the APORDE Scientific Committee, also, of course, to the Department of International Trade, Industry Trade and International Trade and Cooperation of South Africa, and indeed, in particular, to all of you APORDE alumni who have remained engaged and who continue to share your ideas for the better progress of Africa. Thank you very much, and I wish you all successful days ahead. Baba, I think I'm back to you to sign us off, or are we saying bye-bye?
I can sign us off. Thanks again to everyone. I think Yemi's captured things well. But from my side, from TIPS and from the APORDE Organizing Committee, thank you to all our speakers, our moderators, opening and closing presenters and our keynote speaker, and for the participants who've actively engaged. There's lots going on in the chat, And I think, as Baba said, we've got some call to action and things that need to be done. We will send out an evaluation to everyone. So please complete it, identify some areas where we can improve, and we look forward to hosting you at future events. And very importantly, the IPPM and APORDE call for participants will be sent out in the next few days. Please circulate to your networks. With that, thanks everyone and have a good afternoon. We are closing. Thanks very much. Bye.